Marcus Smart catches a lot of hate outside the Celtics fan base. Not Pat Bev or Pandemic P levels, but it's still pretty bad. I know a lot of people just base it off his temper on the court and his fire, and they see it as too strong. Personally, I love it. And especially once you know the story behind it, you'll find some appreciation for it too. This story is pretty heavy, so if that's not what you're looking to watch right now, just go ahead and click off at this point. If you're sticking around, let's get going. Marcus's childhood was the furthest thing from easy. His life was shrouded in tragedy and poor circumstances, which you can't even argue is part of what made him who he is. Marcus was born about 3 weeks prematurely at just 6 pounds and spent nearly the first month of his life in the hospital. A month after returning home, Marcus dwarfed other kids his age. He was completely fine. Then, Marcus's grandma passed away when he was just 3 years old, which no joke might be the most tame thing I talk about from this point on. I wasn't kidding when I said Marcus had it rough. The reason I say that might be the most tame is because of how young he was. No doubt, still pretty shitty though. Marcus was surrounded by gang life starting at a young age, as his older brother Michael was associated with the Bloods. He saw his brother buying, selling, abusing drugs, mostly cocaine. The first time Marcus found it, he said he almost tasted it, but something told him not to. And although Michael told Marcus he didn't want Marcus to follow him down that path, Marcus smoked his first and only joint at the age of 8. The joint actually got him so sick he had to get his mom to take him to the emergency room. As a young kid, Marcus would often make unsuccessful attempts to get Michael to come home when he was out selling drugs or pimping out women or whatever else. When that failed, he'd wait until the early hours of the morning to make sure Michael got home safe. One year at an AAU tournament, Marcus got a call saying Michael had a cocaine overdose and nearly died. After that, Michael avoided drugs, but he didn't fully leave the gang lifestyle and continued to associate with the Bloods. However, he did everything in his power to keep other members from recruiting Marcus, even resorting to threats. That wasn't it for Marcus. His older half-brother, Todd, had been battling cancer since before Marcus was born, and since Todd was 15. Todd was a fantastic basketball player. He shot 62% from the field as a guard one season in high school, and on a specific night Marcus himself had only heard stories of, Todd checked himself out of the hospital to play in a high school game and dropped 30 with his eyes swollen shut. Marcus believed Todd was supposed to be the NBA player in the family, so when Todd died after an 18-year battle with cancer, when Marcus was just 9 years old, he was crushed. Todd was his and Michael's father figure growing up. He taught Michael how to shave, he taught them both how to shake a man's hand and sell themselves in interviews. All those things your father would traditionally teach you, Todd taught them. Yet just like that, he was gone. Marcus said himself in an interview that he admired Todd's tenacity and will to keep going, even when he knew he didn't have much time left. He aspired to be like that. As I mentioned earlier, Marcus's main sport growing up was football. In 6th grade, he dropped it to focus completely on basketball. He wanted to live that dream for himself as much as Todd. After Todd's death, the family moved to a neighborhood in Lancaster near a large apartment complex. This specific area was actually so bad that when other kids heard that he lived there, they made any excuse to avoid going to his house or just avoid him entirely. Marcus became a very angry kid. He'd start fights in school, throw rocks at people or property, him and his friends would steal. He called himself a bully. But on one fateful night at the age of 12, he hit the wrong person. Marcus and a friend of his lobbed rocks from the second story of the apartment complex parking garage Marcus lived near. They knocked a man off a bike and laughed and celebrated, and when Marcus looked back, all that was left was the bike. He heard the man storming up the stairs, threatening to kill them. They jumped from the second story, landing hard on the concrete below and made a run for it. Marcus heard the man's voice clearer and clearer, and when he looked behind him, he saw the man holding a loaded gun. The man got within 15 yards of him before firing off 7 bullets, which thankfully missed. Marcus ducked into an apartment thinking his life was over. When the man opened the door and saw he was Michael's older brother, he walked away. The man was also affiliated with the Bloods and actually approached Marcus and Michael on a basketball court not long after the incident. Marcus, to Michael's confusion, was ready to run at a moment's notice, but the man simply warned him to watch himself and for Michael to keep a better eye on him. That still isn't where it ended for Marcus. A relative of his was accidentally gunned down at 5 years old, one of his cousins was shot dead in their front yard at 16, one of his former AAU teammates was killed by a train at 17, and about 4 years after making it to the league, his mother died from cancer in 2018. And most recently, back in March of 2020, Marcus contracted a certain C-word illness that's incredibly popular right now and spread it to his immunocompromised uncle. Thankfully, his uncle ended up asymptomatic and survived his bout with the disease. I hate to see Marcus getting so heavily disrespected by a majority of NBA fans, because this guy experienced more pain in a 5-year span than some of us will for most of our lives. As you can clearly see, Marcus has quite the story to tell, and I'm glad you stuck around and listened to it. I think it's important more people show this guy some respect. For me, this is one of many reasons I have an eternal respect for Marcus. The dude admitted himself he could have easily ended up in jail or 6 feet under, yet he took that anger and made a career out of it. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.